I am so grateful that you guys love me. Long hair, ponytail, short hair, whatever. Bless you. That'll make a lot more sense in a few minutes. I'm Dan Southerland, one of the pastors at Westside. My opportunity to welcome you today, my honor to get to teach today. So whether you're joining us here at Lenexa, up at Speedway, hey guys, way up at Lansing on the Hill, or anywhere around the globe on the internet, we are thrilled that you're here. Grab your notes. We're in week number 2 of a series called How to Fight Fair. I was watching some TV this week and I caught a little bit of mixed martial arts. Wow, is that rough stuff or what? I mean, you can kick, you can hit, you can elbow, you can knee. I mean, there's not a whole lot that's not allowed in that particular competition. And the point really is dominate your opponent, knock your opponent out, win, and do it as fast as you possibly can. And I think sometimes we take that mentality and we transfer it to our relationships. And when conflict comes up, we think, I want to win, I want to dominate, I want to knock them out, and I want to get this over with as quick as possible. And we don't realize the immense damage that we're doing to the very people that we love the most. So this series is about how to fight fair. Look this way. Everybody has conflict. All God's children got conflict. No matter whether we're talking husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, parent to child, employer to employee, friend to friend, neighbor to neighbor. You stay in any relationship long enough, there will be conflict. And in Acts 15, we see the church in its first major conflict, and they handle it with amazing grace. That's what we're going to look at today. The big idea for this series, I've actually expanded it a bit since last week. Would you write it in? Conflict is normal in a relationship, and it's God's opportunity to grow into maturity. We tend to see conflict as something to be avoided, but actually, no conflict resolution, no conflict in a relationship means you're going to have a shallow relationship. Hey, if y'all never disagree, one of you is not necessary. So some of y'all are going to get that halfway through lunch. We have to have conflict. It is a good thing. It is a necessary thing if we're going to grow into maturity. So last week, Jet, our South African partner, did a great job of talking about getting in the ring, being willing to have conflict. I loved what he talked about when he said we are either peacemakers, peace breakers, or peace fakers. You will hear that again, I promise you. Today, we want to talk about starting with grace. Because if you can set the atmosphere of grace before conflict ever begins, conflict is a whole different critter. The big idea for today's teaching, Jesus wants us to handle conflict without losing our grip on grace. He wants us to handle conflict without losing our grip on grace. When I first drafted this teaching earlier in the week, I put without losing our religion. And then I put without losing our Christianity. And I thought, well, you really can't lose your Christianity, but we sure know how to act like it. I'm amazed at how many kind-hearted, peaceful people, when they get in a conflict and a fight, they get loud and they get profane and they get sarcastic and they get hurtful and they will do anything to win. That doesn't honor Jesus. I know for many of us, that's what was modeled for us growing up. I get it. I grew up in that too. But it doesn't honor Jesus. We got to learn to fight fair, and we got to learn to start with grace. So here's the biggest problem in how we fight. This truth will be related to the board behind me, and we'll talk about what we're going to do with it. Jesus wants us, the problem in how we fight, biggest problem, is we have no grace, which means we have no boundaries. We have no grace, therefore we have no boundaries. Now, this whiteboard is out here today for me to be able to prove that Rob's not the only one that knows how to use it. And that secondly, my goal in life is I just want to be like Rob. That's really pretty much the deal. But I want you somewhere in your notes to draw a square, because we're going to talk about establishing some conflict boundaries. Here's where we get in trouble in conflict. If there's no boundaries, then nobody knows what's out of bounds. If there's no boundaries, then anything goes. If there's no boundaries, you're doing the mixed martial arts of relationships. It's not going to end till somebody gets knocked out. It's not going to end till somebody gets hurt. It's not going to end till somebody wins. So in this passage in Acts 15, they establish 4 grace boundaries. So I'm calling these conflict boundaries or grace boundaries, okay? So kind of put that in your notes there in the middle. Conflict boundaries, that's what we're going to talk about, okay? Now, what's the conflict in Acts chapter 15? Thank you for asking. In the book of Acts, there's been an amazing journey. They start with 12 disciples. They end up with 120 praying together in the upper room. In Acts chapter 2, they baptized 3,000 in a day. Can you imagine? That means all 120 of them had to baptize 25 people each just to get it done. And the church is growing and it's doing well. And it's like nothing can stop it until they have this conflict in Acts 15. First recorded church fight. First recorded conflict for the body of Christ. It's got to be a big one, right? I mean, it's got to be a big theological argument. Actually, it's a small issue that could cause a great split. Their fight is about circumcision. Now, I really don't want to explain what that is this morning. So I'm going to trust that if you don't know, you can Google it and figure it out. But I will say this, what had happened was until Acts 15, all of the people that are following Jesus have been Jewish people. And circumcision was something the Jews practiced that said they were the people of God. It was their sign that they were separate to God. It was their covenant with God. And now all of a sudden, in the last couple of chapters, there's been non-Jewish people giving their lives to Christ, to becoming Christ followers. And all of a sudden, the Jewish folks are saying, hey, it's okay for you to follow Jesus, but you got to become Jewish. You got to do everything we do. You got to look like us. You got to act like us. You got to talk like us. You got to get circumcised like us. Now, I'm going to suggest that to a 40-year-old man, that's a different decision than it was for a 4-year-old baby. I'd started to say it's a bigger deal, but I'm not sure that's the expression I want to use. It's a bigger deal. It really is. And Paul, who's faced with this decision, says, hold on, this is bigger than me. We need to go get some help. So they pull all of the major leaders of the church at that time together, and they basically sit down and work through this conflict. How do they do it? Number one principle, number one conflict boundary. Settle conflict when you are calm. When you are calm. Now, to make sure you know what that means, I'm going to put it up here. Not mad. If you are trying to settle conflict while one or both of you are mad, are you nuts? When we get mad, we get nasty. Turn to your neighbor and say, when you get mad, you get nasty. Tell them. I guarantee you it's the truth. We're louder when we're nasty. We're more sarcastic. We're more profane. We're more cutting. We're more hurtful. I mean, you make me mad, it gets ugly. It gets ugly quick. So literally what happens here is they put this conflict off long enough to travel by boat or by walking as well to both parts of the journey, all the way from Antioch to Jerusalem. Probably took them a month. What happens when you take a month before you resolve your hurt? You're a lot calmer when you resolve it. There's a lot of strong personalities in this early church. If they'd have had a fight while they were all mad, it'd have been ugly and bloody and nasty. But instead, they practiced what James later writes. James is in this conflict. In fact, he helps speak the solution. But he later writes a book of the New Testament, the book of James, where he says, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. Why? For the anger of God does not produce the righteousness. The anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. Let me say it even plainer. When you're angry, you're not going to make the right decision. Hello. And even if you stumble on the right decision, you're not going to do it the right way. When we're angry, we've got to slow it down. Now, let me make a point here. Write it in. It's really plain. When you're mad, be silent. When you're calm, speak up. That includes email and texting. You see, what's happened in the last 10 years is we've decided, oh, I know better than to talk when I'm mad, so I'll type. And we write all kinds of nasty stuff. We were wound up, and we hit that send button, and 5 minutes later we're going, oh, dear God, let me reread what I sent. What did I send? What did I do? And you can't ever get those words back. It doesn't matter how many times you apologize. You can't get them back. A couple of months ago, it was Friday. It had been a difficult week. I was a little grumpy. I wanted my day off. I did not want to be dealing with stuff. The conflicts from the week just kept spilling over into Friday. And Pastor Brian was in the middle of trying to resolve one of them. So I'm just mad. I'm just flat out mad. So I write him a very unkind text. And with wisdom, he texts back, Dan, I'm not used to that kind of a text from you. If you need me to come over where we can talk face to face, I'd be glad to. And his calm answer turned my anger way, way down. If he had texted me back equally mad, the fight would have been on. We do fight with people we love. We do hurt people we love when we do it while we're angry. Number one, calm, not mad. Number two, remember, I want you to write that one over here. Remember what God has done for you. Now, this is a big principle that we sometimes forget. Remember what God has done. And what remembering does is it sets context. I'm going to write context up here. I'm going to have to squeeze it in because I write big. Context. Literally, when they get all of these people together, they start with, not the problem, they start with, hey guys, let's just talk about how good God's been. I mean, has he been amazing or what? Let's tell stories. Let's talk about what he did at Easter. Let's talk about the people that are getting baptized. Let's talk about the lives that are being changed. Let's talk about how awesome it is that the gospel that we thought was just for the Jews has spilled out to the non-Jews as well. And after they've spent a chunk of time remembering how good God has been, then they say, now let's talk about our conflict. And it changes everything. The scripture says, literally, they started by talking about the signs and wonders that God had done. I want you to write this in the notes, and then I want to try to demonstrate it for you. We offer grace because God has already offered grace to us. I will never have to forgive anybody as much as God has forgiven me. And if I'll keep remembering the grace of God, I'll offer grace to others. But if I forget how good he's been to me, grace is gone. Mary and I had a bit of a conflict a couple years ago. It was actually one of the major conflicts of our marriage. We've been married 39 years, 37 at that time. And you've heard me say many times that marriage, in my experience, is the most wonderful, awful thing in the whole world. It really is both. When it's right, there's nothing sweeter. But when it's wrong, there's no heartache that's bigger. And we'd been in a bit of a heartache stretch, just floated apart. And I decided, Southerland, you're the spiritual leader of the home. My life coach counseled me, said, you need to talk to her about this. So I thought, how am I going to do this where I'll be heard? Here's how I started. For 5 minutes, I said, You're the most awesome woman I have ever known. She is. Being married to you has been unbelievable. It's not always been easy. It's never been dull. We have had this incredible journey together. You have been my best friend for 37 years. You are the most amazing mom I've ever known. And as a grandmother, nobody touches you. You've got this amazing gift of teaching, this love for women that are hurting. I don't know a woman that I admire more than I admire you. Lately, there's been a conflict between us that has hurt me. And I know it's hurt you, and I need your help resolving this. And because I started by remembering how good God has been to us, she leaned across the table and said to me, "How can I help?" Now, if I'd walked in and said, the fight would have been on. Set the context. Major on grace. Talk about how good God has been. It changes the entire conversation. Third boundary I want you to put up here is hear each other. Hear each other. And what I want you to put in parentheses with that is hear their whole story. Their whole story. This is so important that we take the time to do this, that we take the time to get their perspective. Now, I want you to look at the major leaders that are in this conflict. Because, guys, I got to tell you, there's no place in the Bible like Acts 15. They've got every major player in Christianity gathered to Jerusalem to talk about this conflict. Now, you guys are thinking, what's the big deal? I mean, we're talking about whether or not you're going to look Jewish. We're talking about whether or not you're going to act Jewish, be Jewish. We're talking about whether or not you're going to be circumcised. It was actually a very small issue that Christianity's future hinged on. Because I got to tell you, if they had decided you had to be Jewish and keep 440 sabbatical laws to be a Christ follower, I'd have never signed up. That's legalism to me. I wouldn't be a Christ follower. So this little conflict they're solving is actually a huge one. Look at who's in the conflict. The Judean teachers, that means the elders, the teachers of the law from Judea, that's the region around Jerusalem. All the pastors of the area, that's the idea, gather up. Paul is there. Anybody reckon Paul had a strong opinion? Paul was born stubborn and got worse. I mean, he's strong about this. Barnabas is there. Thank God Barnabas is there. Barnabas is this soft-spoken guy whose nickname literally is the encourager, because he's always finding people and saying, you could do this. God's going to use you in amazing ways. He's there. The Pharisees are there. Do you think that stirred it up? These are the rule keepers of the rule keepers. They're proud of it. They want to point out what you've been doing wrong. By the way, in every relationship, there's a person that tends toward grace and a person that tends toward rules. And if you're the rule keeper, lighten up, baby. Lighten it up. They're there. Peter's there. Could you get any more major than this? Do you know how many times that Peter and Paul did this? I mean, they were always into it. It's like they were brothers. You know how brothers got to fight? The only thing better is how sisters fight. You know, boy, you girls, y'all can get into it. The fur flies when y'all fight. You know, it's kind of an interesting deal. James is there, the guy who writes the book of James. In fact, when you take out the four Gospels, 3/4 of the writers of the New Testament are in this meeting to resolve this conflict. There are big opinions in this room. Big thinkers, big leaders. What did they do? They listened. They understood the proverb that says the wise listen and add to their learning. Did you know there's no place in the Bible where it says when you talk, you learn more? But there are a half dozen places that say when you listen, you gain wisdom. When you listen, you gain truth. When you listen, you gain perspective. Let me describe it to you. Troy hates that I bring my McDonald's cup every week. In fact, he gets on me almost every week. And he says, Dan, it's unfair. You're advertising for McDonald's. Can I ask you what kind of an advertisement I would be? Wait, seriously, this is helping McDonald's? I'm thinking not. I go by McDonald's because they have iced tea the closest to my house, and I pick it up on the way to the church campus every Sunday, okay? But I noticed something about this cup. What do you see? Can we get a close-up of that cup right there, guys? Can you pull in close to the cup? Yeah, what do you see? In brown print, there's a coffee cup on the bottom of the iced tea cup. I think that's kind of funny. And it says, good days start here. So if I said to you, hey, here's the cup, take it and look at it, tell me what you see, you'd say, looks like a McDonald's cup, brown print, says good days start here, cup of coffee on the bottom. And I would say, no, it doesn't, because look at what I'm looking at on the other side. No coffee cup, red print that says pick you up, won't let you down. So you tell me, there's a brown coffee cup on here. They're advertising coffee. I'm telling you, there's red print on here. Who's right? Who's right? Actually, we're both half right. Because we're seeing half of the cup. In any relationship conflict, you're only seeing half the cup. And if you don't listen, you don't ever learn. There's a whole nother side. If you're just there to deliver your speech, your oral debate, your argument, and go on, you miss the whole thing. Here's the principle, guys. Write it in. We've got to be as committed to listening as we are to speaking to resolve conflict. It's not about who goes first. It's not about who talks the most. It's not about who talks last. It's about practicing grace. Here's the fourth principle if we're going to practice grace, okay? Choose the high road. The high road. Because what happens in most conflicts is nobody's 100% right, and few times is somebody 100% wrong. So what you've got to do is decide, I'm going to take the high road, and I need to realize that may not necessarily be my road. If you're a scorekeeper, you're in trouble. Because you like to win even when you're wrong. I remember one moment when Mary and I had not been married many years, and I was debating something, and I knew she was right, but I wouldn't give up the debate. And she finally looked at me and said, just because you can out-talk me does not mean you're right, and you know it. And I still didn't admit it. Because I was keeping score. I had to win. I had to have my way. Listen close. If you're a person who has to win the moral argument, who has to win the verbal argument, who has to win the fight, who absolutely has to have their way, you're in trouble. Because every time you win, somebody else loses. And in any relationship in life, you make the other person lose often enough, you eventually lose the other person. Period. Period, guys. You think you're winning in your marriage because you always win the argument? Call me when your spouse leaves. Because you make her or him a loser enough, long enough, they will go. You're an employee, but you always have to be right and defend what you say to your boss. Don't call me when you need a job. You're a parent who always thinks the parent has to be right and the kid never is. Don't wonder why your kids try to spend all their time at somebody else's house. You're a friend who has to be right every time. No wonder you have no friends. When you insist on winning every argument, you are losing in the end. Because you're wounding the people you love. So what do? We decide instead to look to the principles, not the winner of the argument. What did they do in Acts 15? How did they make a decision? Here's what they did. Look at verse 19. We're not going to unnecessarily burden non-Jewish people who turn to the Master. In other words, we're not going to make you be Jewish. We're not going to make you look like us, act like us, talk like us. We're not going to insist that you agree. We're going to be okay to disagree. But they did say, here's some principles to live by, and they gave them these principles. Write these in. We'll come back to these in the future because they're amazing principles for making godly decisions. They told them three things. Honor God, stay pure, be wise. Let me give them to you again. Honor God. In every decision, honor God. Stay pure. Do what you know is right, and be wise. And I have literally, for 40 plus years in my life now, tried to make my decisions around these matrices. When I'm in a conflict, how do I make a decision? I ask these three questions. Would you write them in? What's the godly thing to do? What's the pure thing to do? What's the wise thing to do? And all of a sudden, we've taken a high road to grace. Every person in this room has blown it and needs grace from others. And when you find it, you'll become a more grace-giving person yourself. Keep your notes. We got a couple more minutes work to do, but I want you to see this 4-minute story from a Westside guy named Troy. Check this out.
Literally went from an executive at one of the country's largest brokerage houses to homeless, in a matter of just a few short years. I was a very successful broker, had everything that I thought I wanted and could need, and then life just kind of slowly started to crumble and fell into addiction, into depression, and had no faith of anything good for that matter. It took stripping me down to where I was emotionally naked enough that I could listen, and then putting me someplace where I would pay attention. On June 7th, 2013, I fell into a fire, severely burned my legs, and I couldn't work. I was falling behind on the bills. Just my world was caving in around me. And finally, out of desperation, I dropped to my knees and I screamed at the top of my lungs on my front porch. I'm sorry. And I said, God, if you're real, show me now. And 30 minutes later, I was in the Shawnee County Jail for failure to pay child support. When I first got to jail, I had a solitary cell. Cell block guard actually brought me in a Bible, and I literally refused the Bible. I said I didn't want it, I didn't ask for it. The guard just very calmly walked back in with the Bible and said, some things you don't have to ask for. They're a gift. Being in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day, you don't have a lot to do. So eventually I did break down and start reading. How appropriate that we have the rain. And getting through Genesis, I said, okay, God, if you can change the world in 40 days and 40 nights, I'll devote to you 40 days and see if you can help me change my life. And I started reading and I haven't stopped. And it's the greatest love story I've ever read. Every single connection that I've had in my life since leaving Shawnee County has led me to Westside. Every friend I have in Kansas City attends this church. I am getting a new blessing. I'm actually going to get certified so that I can go into Lansing and start mentoring the guys within the walls and helping lead them to Christ the same way that I was led to Christ. Now that I truly understand the power of God's grace, it was time for me, truly understanding, to make an outward commitment to Christ and say, I'm all in. Wherever you lead me, I will go. And that's what my baptism was. It was telling my children, look, we're going to follow him wherever he leads us. I would say maybe they're finally getting to see and getting to have the father they should have had. Getting to see the person I am now. I mean, being able to look at yourself in the mirror and smile. Only God could have done that for me. And now my kids are smiling at me and they're proud of me too. And that's a big deal.
That kind of grace, you will offer that kind of grace to others. And you will do your conflict does with us. Grab your notes. Let's finish them. In all your conflicts, make sure grace wins. Make sure grace wins, because when grace wins, God wins. We all win. I thank you for how you've listened today, church. I want to thank you for one other thing. We saw baptisms from Easter today. We had 8,500 folks in our Kansas City campuses at Easter. We had another 11,000 online. All of that's possible because of how you give to All In. And we've been talking for the last 6 weeks about extending All In through the rest of the calendar year. We've done that. We've had several hundred cards come in, additional commitments, about $400,000 more pledged. Here's what we know. If we continue to give at the rate we are, we will pay this building off, this new addition, before we move into it. We will be able to plant another church in Kansas City in 2015 and 50 more churches in Laos all this year because of how you give. Thank you. Thank you. If you'd like to talk to a prayer partner today, maybe you need somebody to pray over you because you're in a conflict, or you want to talk to someone about a relationship of grace with Jesus, prayer partners will be down front. If you're interested in jumping in at Westside, our Get Connected classes are happening today following the last morning service at both Speedway and Lenexa. Walk in grace this week, church. You don't have to win. Let grace win. Love you.